The night was colder than anything the rancher, Cole Hartman, had felt in a long time. Even the wind sounded strange as it blew across the open land, carrying a chill that reached straight into a man's bones. Cole had spent the whole day repairing a fence on the far side of his ranch, and by the time he rode toward home, darkness had already settled across the valley. His horse snorted, unhappy with the cold, and Cole pulled his coat tighter as he guided the animal along the rocky path. He expected the night to be quiet, just like any other winter night. But halfway down the ridge, he saw something that made him slow his horse. At first, it looked like a dark shape, lying near a low bush. He thought it might be a deer, or maybe a sick cow from one of the nearby ranches. But when he nudged his horse closer, he realized it was a person. Cole stopped, staring for a moment. The stranger lay motionless on the ground, curled slightly, as if trying to protect himself from the cold. The man's clothes were torn and covered in dust. Even from a distance, Cole could see the pale skin and trembling limbs. The stranger looked half frozen. Cole climbed down from his horse, his boots crunching on the frosty ground. He knelt beside the stranger and turned him gently. The man's face was young, no more than 20 years old. His lips were blue, and his eyes fluttered open for only a second before closing again. Cole pressed 2 fingers to his neck and found a weak but steady pulse. Then Cole noticed something else. The stranger's clothing carried a familiar symbol, one belonging to a group that had never been friendly with local ranchers. Cole cursed softly under his breath. Anyone else in the county would have walked away at this point. Some might even have said it was justice. The land had seen enough arguments and anger between the groups that lived here. Taking sides was easy. Helping the enemy was not. But Cole wasn't the kind of man who could leave another human being to freeze to death. He lifted the stranger carefully and hauled him onto the horse. The young man made a faint sound, more of a breath than a word, but he didn't resist. Cole held him steady as they rode toward the cabin. The horse moved slowly through the thick cold, its hooves sinking into patches of frozen dirt. The wind bit at Cole's face, and he kept glancing back at the man leaning heavily against him. The ride felt longer than usual, and by the time they reached the cabin, Cole's fingers had gone numb. He kicked the door open and carried the stranger inside. The cabin was small, just one room with a wooden bed, a table, and a fireplace, but it felt warm compared to the icy night. Cole laid the man near the fireplace and quickly stacked kindling. Within minutes, a bright flame began to grow, casting an orange glow across the walls. The warmth slowly filled the cabin. Cole took off the man's wet coat and wrapped him in 2 thick blankets. The stranger's teeth still shook from the cold. He heated some broth on the stove, then lifted the man's head gently and held the cup near his lips. At first, the stranger coughed, unable to swallow. But Cole waited patiently and tried again. This time the man managed a few sips, then a few more. As the hours passed, the stranger drifted in and out of sleep. Every time he woke, he looked confused, unsure of where he was. Cole sat close enough to keep watch, but far enough not to startle him. Whenever the man stirred, Cole spoke softly, telling him he was safe, telling him to rest. Around midnight, the young man's eyes opened long enough for him to whisper his name, Elias. Cole repeated the name to make sure he heard it right. Elias nodded weakly. His voice was barely more than a whisper, as he explained he had been separated from his group during a sudden storm. He had walked for 2 days with no food and almost no water. The cold had finished what the hunger began. Cole listened quietly. He didn't judge him or ask questions that might reopen old conflicts. Elias seemed relieved to talk to someone who wasn't angry at him. Outside, the winter wind howled like a wolf, rattling the cabin windows. Each time the sound grew loud, Elias flinched and shifted closer to the fire. Cole noticed the way the stranger kept his eyes on him, almost as if he wasn't sure whether to trust him. Cole added more wood to the fire, the sparks snapping into the warm air. "You're all right," Cole said. Just stay close to the heat. You'll be fine come morning. Elias watched him for a long moment, his breathing slow but steady. 2 hours later, the cabin grew warmer. Elias tried to push himself up, but failed. Cole helped him sit, just enough to drink more broth. Elias's hands were still cold, so Cole wrapped them gently in a dry cloth to warm them. The young man stared at Cole like he wasn't sure why someone he'd been taught to fear was taking care of him. Cole didn't have an answer, even for himself. He'd always believed that a person's life mattered more than any argument between groups. Saving a stranger, enemy, or not, was the right thing to do. The night stretched on. At one point, Cole heard footsteps outside. He stood up instantly and stepped between the door and Elias. The stranger looked at him, surprised at how quickly Cole moved to protect him. But after a moment, the footsteps faded. Probably just coyotes or a wandering deer. Cole returned to the fire and adjusted the blankets around Elias. The young man's breathing was calmer now. He had color returning to his cheeks. Cole sat beside him, leaning against the wooden wall, watching the flames dance. A strange feeling settled in the room, quiet, warm, and unexpected. Elias no longer looked like a threat. He looked like someone who had fought against the world alone for too long. Someone who had run out of strength. Someone who had not expected help from anyone, least of all, from a rancher he was raised to distrust. Elias spoke again, this time with more strength. He thanked Cole. Not once, but several times. Each time, Cole waved it off, saying anyone would have done the same. But that wasn't true, and they both knew it. The firelight flickered across Elias's tired eyes. He watched Cole, like he was trying to understand him. Something gentle and almost hopeful passed between them, a quiet recognition that the world was not as divided as they had been taught. Kindness, even from a stranger, even from someone seen as an enemy, could still exist. Why? Cole didn't respond at once. He stared into the fire, thinking. Finally, he said, "Because you needed help. That's enough." Elias lowered his gaze, touched by the simple answer. Near dawn, the cold softened slightly, and a thin line of gray-blue light appeared through the window. Elias tried to sit up again, saying he would leave at sunrise. Cole knelt beside him and shook his head firmly. "You step outside now," Cole said. "You won't make it a mile. You're staying until you're strong." Elias stared at him, surprised again. No one had ever spoken to him with that tone, firm but protective. He lay back slowly, trusting Cole's judgment. The fire crackled warmly. The cabin felt almost peaceful, a shelter against the bitter world outside. As the sky brightened, Elias watched the rancher move around the cabin, adding wood, checking the windows, making sure everything was safe. There was something steady about Cole, something calm that made Elias feel safer than he had felt in years. The rancher glanced over once and saw Elias watching him. Their eyes met briefly, and Cole felt a strange weight in his chest, not fear, not worry, but something softer, something he didn't expect to feel for a stranger. The fire glowed brighter as morning neared. The fear between them had faded, replaced by understanding neither of them had expected. And as the first soft light of sunrise touched the cabin walls, Cole realized something quietly. Helping Elias was already changing something deep inside him. He just didn't know how big that change would be. Sunrise crept across the sky with soft colors of pale gold and silver blue, slowly easing away the heavy cold of the night. Cole Hartman pushed open the cabin door just a little, letting in a bit of fresh morning air. The light spilled onto the wooden floor, and the warmth of the fire mixed gently with the scent of thawing earth outside. Elias blinked slowly as the sunlight reached his face. His breathing sounded stronger. His skin no longer carried the grayish color of someone nearly lost to the cold. Instead, he looked alive again. Cole walked back to the bedside, checking the blankets and feeling the temperature of Elias's forehead. It was warm enough now. Not feverish, just steady. When Elias opened his eyes fully, He looked around the room as if he had forgotten where he was. Then he saw Cole and relaxed, sinking deeper into the blankets. "You made it through the night," Cole said softly. Elias tried to sit up again, this time managing to prop himself against the wooden bed frame. His muscles were stiff, but they obeyed him. He watched Cole move around the cabin with quiet focus, preparing hot water for washing, warming more broth, and setting a kettle above the fire. There was something comforting about the routine. Elias had grown up in a world of noise, conflict, constant moving, and suspicion. Yet here, in this small cabin, the air felt still, safe, and strangely peaceful. When Elias tried to stand, his legs trembled beneath him, and he reached for the edge of the table to steady himself. Cole immediately stepped forward and caught his arm before he could fall. "You're not ready to walk far," the rancher said. His voice wasn't harsh, but it left no room for argument. Elias sighed but didn't protest. He let Cole help him sit again. For a moment he simply watched the flames in the fireplace, his hands wrapped in the blanket, soaking in the warmth. "Thank you," Elias said at last. "I know I've said it already, but I don't have the words for it." Cole nodded. "You don't need to repay me. It was the right thing to do." Elias smiled faintly. A soft, uncertain smile that suggested he wasn't used to kindness without a reason behind it. Many people live their lives planning every move, guarding every thought, expecting a price for everything. But Cole seemed different. His actions felt real, steady, without hidden intentions. The sun rose higher, and Cole stepped outside for a moment to check the land. Elias tried not to worry as the door closed behind him. He trusted Cole. But old habits were hard to forget. Every sound outside reminded him of the life he came from, a life filled with watchfulness. He wondered how his group was doing, if they were searching for him, if they believed he was gone. Before he could think too far, Cole returned. But something about the rancher's expression made Elias sit straighter. Cole looked toward the ridge, and then back at Elias. "There are riders approaching," Cole said quietly. Elias's breath caught. He knew who it had to be. No other group would be out at this early hour, in this part of the valley. His heart thudded in his chest. He tried to stand again, ignoring the weakness in his legs. Cole steadied him. "You don't need to be afraid," Cole said. "I'm not afraid," Elias replied, though his voice shook. "But they won't understand this. They won't understand why I'm here, why you helped me." Cole had no answer. He only helped Elias to the door so he could see for himself. Down the slope, 3 riders were approaching slowly, their horses picking careful steps through the frost. The men wore the same symbol as Elias. Their faces looked worried, determined, and wary. They had been searching all night, maybe even longer. When they spotted him standing beside the rancher, their expressions changed instantly. Shock, confusion, distrust. The riders stopped near the gate. Elias breathed deeply and took a step forward, though he still leaned slightly on Cole for support. For a long moment, no one spoke. The cold morning wind carried the silence between them. Finally, the leader dismounted and walked closer. "What happened?" he asked Elias, though his eyes kept flicking toward Cole. Elias swallowed. This moment mattered more than anything. Every story told between these groups fueled old fires. Every misunderstanding widened the gap. But today, Elias had the chance to change something, even if only a little. "I was caught in the storm," Elias said, his voice quiet but steady. "I wandered for days. I wouldn't be standing here if not for him." He nodded toward Cole. The riders looked from Elias to Cole, unsure what to think. The youngest of them shifted uncomfortably, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Elias continued speaking, telling them exactly how Cole had found him, carried him, warmed him, fed him, and kept him alive through the night. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't hide anything. His voice carried a simple honesty that made the men stop and listen. Cole stood behind him, saying nothing. He didn't want to appear threatening or proud. He simply let Elias speak the truth. When Elias finished, the leader scratched his jaw thoughtfully. His eyes softened just a little, as if the story had shaken something inside him. He stepped closer to Cole, studying him. The rancher did not look away. Then the leader did something unexpected. He extended his hand toward Cole, not in friendship exactly, but in respect, a quiet acknowledgement that saving Elias had meant something. Cole hesitated only a moment before taking the man's hand. Their grip was firm, brief, but stronger in meaning than any words. One of the riders muttered something under his breath, still confused. The leader silenced him with a look. This was bigger than any of them had expected. Elias took a slow breath and turned to Cole. "I need a moment," he said. The riders stepped back, and Cole remained where he was. Elias faced the rancher, searching for the right words. His voice dropped to something softer, something almost hopeful. "I won't forget what you did," Elias said. "People like us, we grow up hearing stories that make us afraid of each other. But last night proved those stories wrong." Cole shifted his weight slightly, unsure how to respond. He wasn't used to emotional words. He spent his life fixing fences, tending cattle, repairing broken things with his hands. Feelings were harder to mend. "You would have done the same," Cole said, though he didn't fully believe it. Not because he doubted Elias, but because he knew kindness like this wasn't common in their part of the world. Elias shook his head lightly. "I don't know if I would have, but I know what I want now. I don't want this to be the last time we speak." Cole felt something tighten in his chest. He stared at Elias, trying to understand the strange sense of connection that had grown between them in just one night. He wasn't someone who formed bonds quickly. Yet here he stood, wishing Elias didn't have to leave. "You have your people," Cole said quietly. "And you have yours," Elias replied. "But one day—" He lifted a hand and placed it gently over Cole's chest, a gesture of deep thanks, a promise that the kindness would not be forgotten. Then, slowly, Elias joined the riders. They watched him carefully, making sure he could stay on his horse. Before leaving, Elias turned in the saddle and looked back at Cole one last time. Their eyes met across the cold morning air. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The riders guided their horses across the ridge and disappeared behind the hills. The sound of hooves faded, replaced by the soft wind that brushed through the valley. Cole stood there long after they were gone. Something inside him felt different, changed in a quiet way that he couldn't explain. Saving Elias had not been just an act of kindness. It had been a moment that broke through years of fear, distrust, and distance. Rumors would spread. He knew that. Some people would call him foolish. Others would say he was brave. But Cole didn't care about opinions. He remembered the look in Elias's eyes, the gratitude, the trust, and the hope for something better. When he finally walked back into the cabin, the fire was still glowing warmly. Cole added a small log, watching the flames rise. For the first time in a long while, the cabin didn't feel as empty. Without realizing it, Cole left the door unlocked. Maybe out of habit, maybe out of hope, maybe because, deep down, he wished that one day someone might knock again, someone who owed him his life, and someone he wouldn't mind seeing return.